You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, how is everybody on this Friday? I hope you had a good week. We're doing a little bit of a later show for those of you who usually tune in at 3 o'clock. Sorry, life happens. But the subject of today's show is convicting a murderer. We're going to talk about it one more time. Is Steven Avery the lovable, huggable killer that we all have come to know and love? That's the way they present it. That's at least in the beginning, they're talking about how much Making a Murderer made people bond with Steven Avery, how much they liked him, how he seemed like a kind of relatable guy that you would have over, right? Or that you could see yourself being. And we're going to talk a little bit about the first bit of Convicting a Murderer and talk a little bit about, we also have some mail, and we're also going to look at a video together of Steven Avery's kids. So stay tuned, and I'll be back right after this break. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. So yesterday, I had just watched the first 3 episodes of Convicting a Murderer, and I was really disappointed. For one, we've been waiting for a really long time for this to come out. 2, it's to me, it felt very disjointed. Candace Owens has been edited into it to make it look like she's investigating in real time, but the story is also a little old now. It's not, I think there's a lot of young people that don't even know what Making a Murderer is, miss the whole phenomenon. It's been quite a while. So, and in addition, I was asking where Ken Kratz was, because if you tuned in yesterday, the first trailer that we saw, because it's called Convicting a Murderer, and because of the trailer showed Ken Kratz teeing off with a Steven Avery supporter, I really thought that Ken Kratz was going to be the one to lead us through the story. But instead right now we have 2 narrators. We have Candace Owens, who is the conservative Daily Wire, I don't know, what would you call her? A personality, a talk show host, both. And we also have Brenda Schuler, who helped, she calls herself an expert on the case. We see all her bound books and her research, her room of research, and she shows us, or the camera, her notes to Ken Kratz on his book, and Michael Griesbach, the prosecutor who overturned Steven Avery's first conviction for his essay of Penny Bernstein. So I think what they mean by her showing us her notes to Ken Kratz, what we're meant to take from that is, look, see, she's really more of an expert than even the prosecutor. It's going to be even better, right? So she's going around to these true believers. And it's a little different when she's teeing off with them because, for one, when Ken Kratz is teeing off with a Steven Avery supporter, he's confronting the people that harass, who, not specifically the person, but a person who represents a group of people who have harassed and really gone after him, called him. He describes the scene in his book where someone comes to his office when he was practicing law, I believe in Wisconsin, and saying, "Oh, I have your fingerprints. You're the real killer," meaning like, I have your fingerprints from your office door handle. You're the real killer, like crazy stuff. So it's a little bit emotionally more intense than I'm looking at this going, why do I care whether Joe Blow in Timbuktu thinks Steven Avery is innocent, right? So I was really disappointed. I was asking where Ken Kratz was yesterday, and I said, if he's in the later episodes, I've only seen the first 3, I will apologize. So we got a message from Sean Reich, the director, in the comment section of yesterday's episode, and he writes, Ken Kratz sat for 4 interviews and is all over the later episodes. He just wasn't in the first 3. So I apologize. I just, I still miss his presence. I will say that. It doesn't change that I think, one of the things is that we're assuming that these interviews have the same weight as something said in court. I hope that the audience isn't picking that up, but it has that flavor and feel of Making a Murder. Like, whatever is said in these interviews should be believed totally with the same weight as what is said in court, under oath, under penalty of perjury. So that was one issue I had, but it's kind of interesting. What I'm going to argue today is that you could not have the Making a Murderer phenomenon without Steven Avery's, what they call in this, an exoneration, quote unquote. And I'm just going to throw out the question, how was he exonerated? We don't really have a thing in our justice system like an exoneration. We have an overturned conviction. We don't have a kind of like, at least that I know of, any kind of, I think a prosecutor can give a stamp of innocence. Was he given one? I don't know. But my understanding was his conviction was overturned. Basically, Michael Griesbach found out about the DNA evidence, came in and was like, okay, your conviction is gone. You're free to go. And I don't think the evidence was ever really explored. It wasn't like another trial. So maybe I've just seen too many of these, what do you call, innocence fraud grifts. But I find it really odd. I always have in this story that let's look at Steven Avery, right, and Gregory Allen. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it's like a lightning strike situation, right? That someone would have this same provocation who looks just like you, right? So I just thought that was, I've always just found it very interesting. And I would like to know more about it. And if anybody has the transcripts from Penny Bernstein's or Steven Avery's trial over his victimization of Penny Bernstein, let me know. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that. But without that, that's really at the forefront. And I think I picked out this interview because it really shows how much this exoneration with his kids, with this interview with Steven Avery's kids, how much this exoneration is the emotional attachment. Because otherwise, why would you like, oh, it's happening to him again. And I don't want to be the one like back in the 80s who thought Stephen Avery was guilty. It sure looks like he was guilty by what we know of his background, right? But he did have all these alibis. Is he guilty? Is he not guilty? But it makes you think, what would I do if I were wrongfully convicted? So let's look at this. Let's actually take a quick break, and we'll take a look at this interview with his twin sons when we come back. I'll meet you on the other side of the break. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. Yeah, and to bring off also Candace Owens, like I brought up yesterday, it's just a very interesting time that she's doing that the show is coming out. Seems like she's doing the show right in real time. Thank you, Heyy Manny, very much for the generous super sticker. I appreciate it. Because she has come under fire for supporting the Tates and attacking Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate's victims. So it gets ironic at times when she's talking about Stephen Avery and what victims do. Just very odd. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised if that is one of the challenges of selling this now, but who knows? What do you guys think? Let's look at this interview, shall we?
Picked apart by anyone with even a passing interest in justice.
We all live on Avery Road. This could be any of us. You're a joke.
Was evidence planted? Were confessions coerced? Is Stephen Avery a cold-blooded killer? These are just some of the questions raised by the controversial 10-part documentary series, Making a Murderer.
So I just want to say that is one of the cliches. I think Bob Ruff says you might never do a crime, but that doesn't mean you won't be convicted of one, right? And I love in this, I don't know which episode, in one of these episodes, someone says, it couldn't happen to me because I didn't kill anybody. Someone says that to him, that's his answer, which I think is perfect. But I think that's something everybody can imagine themselves wrongly convicted, but you're more likely to be a victim of a crime.
You've heard the prosecution's case. You've heard from the defense that there's an underside of the complicated 3-decade-long story.
It's not like that.
That's never been heard. Until now.
So your family is in a mega spotlight right now. And I'm curious how this is affecting both of you.
It sucks knowing that like our business is getting out there.
In their first ever TV interview.
I was mad, I was upset.
Yeah, it's a little inconvenient with my dating life when I have to when I have to disclose that Stephen Avery is my father, right? And so this is really interesting. So we have the smiley face killer, not to be confused with the smiley face killers, William Ramsey's specialty. We have his daughter interviewing them. So it's really interesting. So you would think that the reason she was chosen for this interview is because her father's a killer, their father's a killer, right? But in this, all they talk about is innocence, and could he be innocent? And like it's up in the air. Like we don't have a legal system. It can't be figured out. It'll never be really known. Kind of. It's interesting.
Why would you just throw it away?
Stephen Avery's children, twins Bill and Stephen Jr., agreed to sit down only with me to talk about a feeling I know all too well. After discovering my own father, Keith Jesperson, was the happy-faced serial killer.
So when they say only, it's really interesting, the language there. Only by me. They agree to sit down only by me. So is that like we're only going to... So they're implying there that these twins were like, we're only doing this interview if you get another killer's child to interview us, right? Interesting, right? But I think what she's doing is hyping it up, right? But
the feeling of living in the shadow of infamy.
Stephen, why did you agree to do this interview?
A lot of it was for you, like, because your backstory, like who your dad was, like what you dealt with. We have similar backstories, and you actually know what it's like to go through it.
Though the boys don't recall being asked to participate in the documentary, at the time they say most of the family wanted to stay out of the public eye. But now they feel the time is finally right to share their story.
When is the last time you spoke to your father?
Oh, wow. I mean, that was 20-some years ago.
Do you have any questions for him?
No. I don't. Like, the main question would be, like, you can't ask him, like, why'd you leave? Because I know why you left.
Before everyone had an opinion about his life,
I think the evidence was overwhelming.
Stephen A.
Wait, what was that sign? I just want to read that sign. It's so weird. Hold on. Can we go back just a little bit? Let's see if we can catch
I know
it.
why you left.
Before everyone had an opinion about his life,
I think the evidence was overwhelming.
What was that?
Stephen Avery was
Does
a
anybody know what that
19-year-old
said?
boy in love. He had just met a young single mom named Lori Matheson, and after a quick courtship, the two married and started a family of their own, 5 kids in all, with Bill and Stephen Jr. rounding out the bunch.
It's clear to see that he did love us, that he did love our mom, but there's always two sides to people.
He'd had run-ins with the law before, but by the time Stephen Sr. was 22, by his own account, he felt blessed and content. Then, as shown in episode 1 of the documentary, a local woman was attacked and beaten while jogging. Almost right away, Stephen Avery was arrested and charged with sexual assault and attempted murder.
The sheriff told me I got you now.
Stephen swore his innocence, but as seen in the documentary, after a brief, some would say, shoddy investigation, he was found guilty and sentenced to 32 years behind bars. A family lost all sense of normalcy.
Bill, what is your earliest memory of your dad?
I guess more or less seeing him or visiting him in prison.
So as a little kid, why did you think your dad was in prison? Did they ever explain why he was there?
If they did, I don't remember.
Boy, do they look like him, right? But once again, they're setting up. This is all based on the previous wrongful conviction, right? That I don't think you could sell this without it and have the emotional attachment. And you can see those people, flew in from different states to protest. Not a whole lot of them, but some real true believers.
Remember, as a kid, I just knew I didn't really have a dad. I didn't know why. Maybe somebody might have told me. I just never really understood.
Something else the kids couldn't understand at such a young age, what the world now knows, is that their father was completely innocent of the crime for which he was imprisoned. It would be a full 18 years until DNA evidence exonerated Stephen Avery of the brutal sexual assault. 18 years too late to save his family.
When you hung out with your dad, what kind of things would you do or talk about? Do you recall? And
I don't.
So they're painting his wrongful conviction on the same plane. A little bit later, they're going to say that Stephen Avery's family has suffered in the same way that Teresa Hallback's family has suffered. That they were robbed of 18 years. They were robbed of their life. Where Teresa Hallback was really robbed of her life, which you would think that an interviewer with this past would be more sensitive, no?
I don't really recall any of that. I remember him giving us like hugs and kisses, but I think the visitation was like 3 hours or something. I mean, you can't really build much of a bond on a 3-hour visitation once a month.
A few years after his incarceration, Stephen's marriage to Lori fell apart. As the children grew older and more independent, their relationship with their father began to fade as well.
eventually you decided not to visit your dad anymore. What happened?
Me and my brother, like we had like ADHD, so we never sat still. Always bugging other inmates, doing their visitations with their family and stuff. And my dad ended up getting like upset, so he spanked us.
Do you feel like your dad was disciplining you?
So he spanked them on a prison visit. I mean, that's a way to get back control, right? I'm still the father, right? I still do the disciplining.
Or do you believe that he was just out of control?
A little bit of both, in a way. I was just tired of it.
Yeah.
Being young and to know you're going to go up there and get spanked. And finally, we actually got our visitation pulled.
And that was a relief?
Yeah, I think it was.
But even though they no longer had any physical ties to their father, shaking his reputation would be another story entirely.
Your father's been accused of rape for 18 years. He's serving life for that. Having an Avery name, what does that mean in the community?
A lot of people associate with like we're a bunch of like troublemakers. We're in a sense like bad people. We don't care about the law. I mean,
if you look at I love the way he says this, like it's so far-fetched. If you look at the Avery family's criminal history, it is quite extensive, not just Stephen. So the Making a Murderer makes it look like the entire town is so unfair to the Avery family for having negative thoughts about them or for outcasting them. But he's like, they think we're criminals. I don't know why. when we've had a lot of contact with law enforcement.
The arrogance of people are just like the sins of the father fall on the son, which it shouldn't be like that.
Can you recall an incident or anything that's happened that impacted you because you had the Avery last name?
Yeah, I mean, me and my brother, we applied for this security firm. We more than qualified for it, but this is all hearsay. But one of the main guys that works there is like it would be like a cold day in hell before they ever get hired.
Despite their adversity,
I mean, you're not your father, right? But you can understand at a security job, when you come from the Avery family, it's not just his father's reputation, it's his whole family's reputation.
the Avery boys thrived under their mother's guidance. Both joined the military and eventually started families of their own. It was a challenging life, but even knowing what they know now, they stayed positive.
But if he's innocent, you were robbed too.
Yeah, definitely was. I mean, at the same point, like I had a good life. Like I would not trade this life to see where that life led.
Then, in 2003, just as the Avery boys were becoming men, life as they knew it took another drastic turn.
How you doing?
Oh, hello. Now we're to the point that he's released, and I'm trying to imagine, even though he's a stranger to you, what do you feel about him serving 18 years for a crime he didn't commit?
I actually feel bad for him because I think about like if that would happen to me, just how.
I mean, I'm just wondering, why can't you just say his conviction was overturned? I mean, how can we be so sure without a trial that Gregory Allen convicted us? Isn't this the movement that says we have to, right? Innocent until proven guilty? I mean, isn't that showing some bias? Am I crazy?
You know, mad and angry and everything. And to know all it took was a DNA test. I think he deserved to actually be set free a lot earlier.
Now this is a new dynamic. How does your life change at that point?
It changed. Like my last name got better because once he got exonerated, a lot of people had, in a sense, like joined our side. In a sense, it felt nice.
The good feelings would not last. 2 years after Stephen's release, local photographer Teresa Halbach disappeared without a trace.
So not only was this an absolutely celebratory moment, put the Wisconsin Innocence Project on the map, celebratory moment for the wrongful conviction movement. It really, I mean, he became, they say it, poster boy for the Innocence Project in Wisconsin. So to have him reoffend would be seriously embarrassing. And you can see we've had a couple, I've talked about a couple of those stories, right, where people have had their conviction overturned by the Innocence Project only to reoffend again. And what happens? Not widely cut, like it's a flash in the pan story, right? Here today, gone tomorrow, and then forgotten. But it really, you know, as much as they can kind of put that out of the public consciousness, they can. But this was such a big story. It was hard to ignore.
Last known location, Stephen Avery's property.
Do we have a body or anything yet?
I don't believe so.
We have Stephen Avery in custody, though.
Once again, Stephen Avery becomes the main suspect in a heinous crime. And for some in the community, there's an eerie feeling that history may be repeating itself. He served 18 years for a violent sexual assault he didn't commit. Railroaded, supporters say, by corrupt officials with a personal vendetta.
Was he railroaded? Because the agency that looked into it said he wasn't. Said it was an honest mistake. They didn't have DNA back then. And why wasn't, you know, I don't know. I mean, how is history repeating itself again? Of a guy who got convicted of a crime, wouldn't you say it was more likely maybe to do a crime, right? Well, we know Avery's, you know, in the first couple episodes, talk about Avery's history, just his personal violent history. I mean, why is it so unbelievable? But it's all connected to Penny Bernstein's case. And, you know, I'll be the one who's so insightful and can see beyond the obvious and can see the big picture, right? It can really play into your ego and your narcissism.
Then, 2 years after his triumphant exoneration, it happened again. But there's another story, one that has never been told until now.
People are watching your family tragedy play it on TV, and it's your real life, though.
It sucks having everything all in the open like that, but at the same point, it's good because a lot of people get to see like a little bit of a bigger picture.
In this Crime Watch Daily exclusive,
how is this a family tragedy? Just putting it out there. I mean, I get it's a very tough break for his kids, but calling it a family tragedy, I would call that Teresa Halbach's murder family tragedy for her family. But Stephen Avery, he had a choice, right?
Stephen Avery's own boys agreed to sit down for the first time on national television to talk candidly about growing up as an Avery, a now infamous name.
I recently did a search and I found out that your name, Stephen Avery, is the most Googled item on Google. Over 73 million people have searched your name.
I don't know
Interestingly, Andrew Tate is supposed to be the most Googled person right now. Just a little bit of an interesting coincidence.
what to take on that. I mean, it's insane.
Stephen Avery's twin boys, Bill and Stephen Jr., were just teenagers when DNA testing finally exonerated their father. But before they had a chance to reconnect with the dad they never knew, 25-year-old photographer Teresa Halbach disappears and is presumed murdered. Right away, police zero in on Stephen Avery, along with his young nephew, Brendan Dassey.
Do we have a body or anything yet?
I don't believe so.
We have Stephen Avery in custody, though.
Suspiciously, Avery was suing Manitowoc County for his wrongful incarceration at the time, and was just months away from a ruling which could have put key officials on the hook for nearly $36 million.
We know from history that he was an innocent man the first time.
They act like that's coming from their pockets. Their insurance company on the hook, I guess, would be a better way to say it.
Going into the second case, the case of the murder of Teresa Halbach, did you think your dad was innocent or guilty?
I actually thought he was innocent because, like, with me, if I was getting that much money, I wouldn't do anything at all.
That'd be a good incentive.
Yeah, especially when it's already in the court systems going through you, and then to go out and do that, I don't know, it just makes no sense to me.
Whether or not Avery was guilty of...
Welcome to the mind of a murderer. I love when people say that. Like, it just makes no sense. Why would OJ kill somebody, kill his ex-wife, right? And Ron Goldman, right before he's supposed to take a trip. Try to put logic and common sense into a senseless murder and see what you come up with. Anytime you don't do what Stephen Avery wants, he's like an executive. He sends off those letters right away, but they're all written like a 2-year-old, like practically, scrawled all over the page. And when I was getting trained by Kevin DeBecker, that's one thing they tell you to look at when you're looking for threat assessment on letters, just like the spacing, and it like has no space, like the lines aren't, it's just like stick figure drawings of what he's going to do. It was really crazy how he has any supporters and the leaps and bounds that they will go to make excuses for him is quite amazing. And one of my issues with Convicting a Murderer is that they really single out these true supporters as the issue when it's the lawyers that did this, and the filmmakers and Netflix who are making money on this grift on Teresa Halbach's, blood money on Teresa Halbach's murder, and trying to get her murderers out of prison. I mean, it just seems like, one of the people they talk about is someone I've talked about who's a real true believer in all cases of innocence, right? Or all what I'd call innocence fraud cases. Cassie, they use her with her vaping and, her real intensity. And she has a little bit of issue. Wait, hold on. Let me just show you this real quick. See if I can just toss this. Hold on one second. See if I can really quickly show you. Yeah. So here's her tweet to the Sean Reich, the director of Convicting a Murderer. She writes, "Wow, Sean, you put people in your TV show without permission. One would think that when you promote a TV show, specifically Convicting a Murderer, as content that promotes truth, you would at least first consult with people you are using to grift." So, and he says, he writes back, "You're so important. If you're a paralegal, talk to some of your attorneys." So he's basically like, bring it on. Bring on a lawsuit. So little interesting that I guess he'll claim fair use, and it'll go like that. But those people are really made to look like they're moving this thing forward, when it's really like Laura Ryder, the whole host, the whole list of lawyers, right? Strang, all of them.
How's this make you feel, Bill?
A little mixed feelings. Like I care
Feuding.
a lot for my mom, so it kind of makes me look at him different.
What about you, Steve?
I agree with him. He says he loves her, that he always loved her, that he loves us. And I know that he does, but he's also showing it in the wrong ways.
Ways that some say indicate a propensity for violence against women.
One of the letters, it says to your mom.
Some say that. Who disputes that? Who disputes that? Threatening women through the mail, threatening their life, and his past behavior that he's been reported to the police for doing. Who's saying that is not abusive, or reflects? Who's saying those letters and that behavior doesn't reflect an abusive man?
Mom, don't bang up my kids. Like, I will hurt you if you hurt my kids. What do you think about that?
That's one of the letters that made me kind of like cut all contact and not really want any contact, I guess.
If you love somebody, you don't threaten them like that.
Do you feel like this clip, this documentary, is portraying your dad in a sympathetic light?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know he's got like anger issues a lot.
Is it temper?
Yeah, I guess he'll like just blow up and go into full rage mode.
So it's possible that he could have killed Teresa?
Yeah, I guess.
So then the question remains.
So it seems like they both dressed up. They dressed alike in twin fashion, right? One wears red, one wears blue. For those listening on podcast, same button-down shirts. And they were like, well, we didn't think you would ask us this. We were just prepared to say, no, he didn't do it, right? You can see that I don't know. I didn't find that too convincing. He's like, don't make me say it. But yes, it's obvious that someone with that background is more likely to do it than someone without. And the person I know is more likely to do this than not. Please don't make me say that. Please don't have the rest of that Avery clan, because what we know about the Avery clan is they're very cultish. And we know that from Brendan Dassey. Brendan Dassey wanted to make a deal with the state, and they said, don't do it, because everything's for Stephen. And Stephen really became not only the star of the wrongful conviction movie, the star of this family with his overturned conviction. And he was going to bring in all this money. He was going to make the Averys, I don't know, that would have been a great reality show, right? The Averys, get millions from this wrongful conviction suit, follow them. But I think he got like $750,000, and it all went to his defense team. And why, with a really expensive defense team, did he still lose? Is anyone asking that? I guess the answer is because of the corruption in Wisconsin, right? That's the answer.
Remains the question I just had to ask.
Is your father guilty of the murder of Teresa Hallback?
I have no idea. I mean, only one person could answer that, and that would be Teresa. But she can't answer it no more. The only thing I know is that
I think Brendan Dassey can answer that too. I think the jury is pretty confident. I don't know. Has anybody visited them lately? I think they were pretty confident he did it. I'm pretty confident he did it.
the entire case was very shady. It's clear that there was corruption. I think him and Brendan deserve a fair trial. If they're guilty, let them sit. But if they're free, I mean, get them out.
Today,
Yeah. You know who also I think deserves be tried for this, right? Gregory Allen. Let's get him a trial. Let's see what's going on. Let's see the evidence.
Stephen Avery has a new lawyer, high-profile defense attorney Kathleen Zellner, a woman famous for overturning wrongful convictions. Zellner claims new advances in scientific testing may once again exonerate her client. Of course, if that happens, it would bring up a whole host of serious implications.
Were you angry with the state?
No, I'm not angry with the state. It's not the county or it's not the state that did it. It's the people that are in charge of it. They wasted 18 years of a man's life for no reason because they didn't want to do their jobs correctly. If they did plant evidence, if they did do all this.
So let's see the evidence of them not doing their job correctly, because the people that investigated said the things were done correctly and mistakes were made because people are fallible. But that's also another issue I have with convicting a murderer. They say this report drops. They investigated what happened with Stephen Avery in the Penny Bernstein case, and they determined that there was no corruption, nothing illegal going on. Everything was done by the letter. There just was some mistakes. So what were the mistakes? I mean, was the mistake that DNA didn't exist in 1985? I mean, is that the mistake?
Stuff like that's really wrong. Like, to take away a man's life, they deserve to sit then.
Do what your father's doing.
Yeah.
His life was not taken away. He's still alive. And it's callous of you to say that, given Teresa Hallback is not alive.
Serving time.
Thanks to your dad.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever the outcome, it's important to remember that this is more than just a news story.
What if he's innocent?
Well, I guess they'd get him out. I mean, maybe I'll try to have a relationship with him. I don't know yet at this point.
He makes a disgusted face when he says, I'll have a relationship with him. And he says, what if he's innocent? You see the surprise? Like, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. I'm not planning for that, because I think that the odds of that are pretty far-fetched, lady.
From the Hallbacks to the Averys, these are real people whose lives are being impacted in very real ways.
What are your feelings for your dad today?
I kind of, in a way, have none, I guess. Like, I just see him as a complete stranger. Like, it just kind of feels like I don't have a father.
He deserves to get to know me. I am his son, even though, like, I don't look at him as a father. I might never will. I mean, I'm a 30-year-old man. It's kind of late in life to get a huge bond like that. But I'm willing to, I guess, give it a shot.
Look how angry he is when he says that. When he says, I'm just going to give it a shot. Like, just so much intense anger, right? Interesting. I just thought that was such an interesting interview, especially because they didn't really go into any of the real details. You would think they would bring out maybe a blood vial, all the traditional stuff. The things that Convicting a Murderer says that they are going to look at are the key to Teresa Hallback's car, the blood vial, and the timing of the $36 million lawsuit. So they see that as the kind of three major pieces of propaganda that sell the Making a Murderer story. But I would argue that really what sells the Making a Murderer story is the lawyers. And they're still out there. I mean, they've gone on speaking tours, books. I mean, they've become celebrities from this. And I'm sure their fees have gone up appropriately for, Laura Ryder, Brendan Dassey's lawyer, also big on Team Adnan, right? And it's really interesting. You find out that Laura Riccardi was a lawyer. She's on the right, the director. So here's the two directors. They're a couple, Maura Demos and Laura Riccardi. And Laura Riccardi was a lawyer. She saw Stephen Avery's exoneration on the front cover, quote unquote exoneration. Not, that's the language that they use in this. His exoneration, his overturned conviction, and his great homecoming, and his arrest, right? His arrest on for Teresa Hallback's murder. She gets immediately interested, and she's telling the Avery family that even before she starts filming that she believes Avery's innocent, having never attended the trial. Oh, well, I guess the trial hadn't gone on yet. So she does attend the trial, but then she edits it. So she edits it to make it look like it's something it's not. So we have someone with an agenda who wants to see innocence. And I would argue that someone with a background in law understands the significance of someone who's the poster child of the wrongful conviction movement getting charged with a very serious crime. Doesn't make them look good. So yeah, I would argue that those are the people that I would really like to be asked the tough questions. And those are the people I wonder why they advocate for Stephen Avery, not, Joe Schmo in Timbuktu, who was part of a Zoom meeting talking about. But here's just a picture of Gregory Allen on the left, the artist profile that was drawn from Peggy Bernstein's description. She said, I had to make myself calm and tell myself to remember everything about his face. So kind of interesting. But I would really like to see, more about, because I think it's such a central part of things. But we'll see as it goes on. I'll come back tomorrow and talk a little bit more about it, I think, hopefully. I have a lot more to say, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the whole thing and seeing how they put it together, because right now it looks like the most pressing issue is whether we can convert, Stephen Avery supporters or showing their ideology and their poor rational thinking skills. I think that's what its aim is. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comment section. And I will see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody. Enjoy it.